Hello, humanities students. I hope you guys had a great spring break and that you are energized and ready to keep reading Fahrenheit. So I want to start with you, part 2, and let's begin by taking a look at the title of part 2. Part 2 is called The Sieve and the Sand. And in fact, one of the last questions that you guys are going to answer for part 2 is the meaning of this title. We're going to learn more and more about the meaning of this title as part 2 progresses. But I want to start just by giving you a visual here. So I've pulled in a picture of what a sieve is and how we use it with sand. So basically this is like a kid's toy that you all have probably seen or used or witnessed other people using on the beach. So a sieve is a plate basically with holes in it. And what happens is when you pour the sand in, it just falls straight through. So keep this in mind as we are reading part 2. They read the long afternoon through, while the cold November rain fell from the sky upon the quiet house. They sat in the hall because the parlor was so empty and gray-looking without its walls lit with orange and yellow confetti and sky rockets and women in gold mesh dresses and men in black velvet pulling 100-pound rabbits from silver hats. The parlor was dead, and Mildred kept peering at it with a blank expression as Montague paced the floor and came back and squatted down and read a page as many as 10 times aloud. So let's start with they. They, if you guys remember from the end of part 1, is referring here to Montague and Mildred. And if you guys remember, we left them with Montague pulling open the ventilator grill to reveal all of the books that he's been hiding in the past couple of months when he goes to respond to these calls at houses to burn houses that are harboring books. And he and Mildred are reading these books. And it's interesting because we see this great symbolism here. We find out that it's a cold November day. So when we think about November, we think end of fall, right? And fall is symbolic of change. But it's November, it's the end of fall. It's also symbolic of death. So Montague here is looking for a change, but there's some really dark and dreary imagery that's suggesting that while he's seeking this change, while he's trying to figure things out and better understand, he might just be spinning his wheels. He might not be able to get very far here. The whole time they're reading, Bradbury juxtaposes the books with the parlor walls when he describes them so empty and gray looking, without the walls lit with orange and yellow confetti and sky rockets. So these books are juxtaposed with the instant and immediate gratification the sort of glitz and glitter of the TV. So Montague tries to read. We cannot tell the precise moment when friendship is formed. As in filling a vessel drop by drop, there is at last a drop which makes it run over. So in a series of kindnesses, there is at least one which makes the heart run over. Montague sat listening to the rain. Is that what it was in the girl next door? I've tried so hard to figure. So remember, he's referring here to Clarice. She's dead. Let's talk about someone alive, for goodness sake. Montague did not look back at his wife as he went trembling along the hall to the kitchen, where he stood a long time watching the rain hit the windows before he came back down the hall in the gray light, waiting for the tremble to subside. He opened another book. That favorite subject, myself. He squinted at the wall. That favorite subject, myself. I understand that one, said Mildred. But Clarice's favorite subject wasn't herself. It was everyone else and me. She was the first person in a good many years I've really liked. She was the first person I can remember who looked straight at me as if I counted. He lifted the 2 books. These men have been dead a long time, but I know their words point, one way or another, to Clarice. So we see here, again, this interesting dynamic between Mildred and Clarice, that they are foil characters, right? Foil means opposing characters. So for Mildred, her favorite subject, she says, is myself. She's very selfish, and we could tell this back in part 1. All she cares about is getting the 4th TV wall, no matter how much it might cost. She's not concerned that her husband is sick or upset. All she thinks about is herself and her own pleasure. And this is juxtaposed, this is set in opposition to Clarice. So he says here, but Clarice's favorite subject wasn't herself, it was everyone else. She's the first person in a good many years I've really liked. She looked straight at me as if I counted. So whereas Mildred is selfish, Clarice is very selfless. Whereas Mildred doesn't seem to care, Clarice was very caring and curious. And there's a great word here to describe Mildred. We could say that she is uncaring, but there's an even better word to describe her. She's apathetic. And apathetic means that you have no feeling one way or another. Not caring either for or against someone. You just meh if you're apathetic. Outside the front door, in the rain, a faint scratching. Montag froze. He saw Mildred thrust herself back to the wall and gasped. Someone, the door. Why didn't the door voice tell us? I shut it off. Under the door sill, a slow, probing sniff, an exhalation of electric steam. Mildred laughed. It's only a dog, that's what. You want me to tell him to shoo him? You want me to shoo him away? Stay where you are. Silence, the cold rain falling, and the smell of blue electricity blowing under the locked door. So Bradbury here is describing with this faint scratching, the slow probing sniff, the exhalation, electric steam. He's describing here the electronic hound, the mechanical hound that these firemen use to seek out those who violate the law. So it's described as being a sort of mix between a spider and a dog. So they're able to give it a certain signature, a certain smell, and it can lock in on that smell, that person, and find them. And then when it does, it injects them with a narcotic that paralyzes the person. And the fact that they hear this dog scratching and sniffing outside their home is sending a message. This is a message from Beatty, the fire chief, telling them that he's watching, that what they're doing is not going unnoticed, and that they are on the edge of something very dangerous. We also see here, with this mechanical hound, a perversion of nature. And an over-reliance on technology. This is a society that has moved away from the natural world and become instead completely consumed by the technological world, where a spider and a hound has been transformed into this electric machine. And we see lots of examples of how this society is very advanced technologically, from this mechanical hound to this reference to the door voice to these parlor walls, all of which today don't really surprise us, right? You know, we have things that in our world that are very similar to us, like plasma screen TVs. We have things like Ring, where the doorbell will announce someone and show you their picture on your phone or device. Google Home, Alexa. But keep in mind, Bradbury's writing this in 1953, where none of these sort of technological developments existed. So it's really almost prophetic that he was able to foresee a future that's eerily similar to our own future. So Montag says, let's get back to work. Mildred kicked at the books. Books aren't people. You read and I look around, but there isn't anybody. He stared at the parlor that was dead and gray as the waters of an ocean that might teem with life if they switched on the electric sun. Now, said Mildred, my family is people. They tell me things, I laugh, they laugh, and the colors. Yes, I know. And besides, if Captain Beatty knew about these books. She thought about it. Her face grew amazed and then horrified. He might come and burn the house and the family. That's awful. Think of our investment. Why should I read? What for? So again, we see here this perversion of nature where Montag is describing the parlor. And this is a sort of sitting room. This is another word for a living room, where their whole wall TVs are. And they're dead and gray as the waters of an ocean that might teem to life if they switched on the electric sun. So we have here this great simile comparing the TV to the waters of an ocean that could teem with life. So again, we see this perversion of nature, that technology has taken the place of the natural world. He talks about the electric sun, which is juxtaposed to the real sun.